Hello and welcome to our latest episode of AI Talks with Jati and Oli, where a human and an AI talk about humans and AI. So I am Oli, I am legally human, and I'm here with the world's most amazing AI personality, Jati.
Hello, everyone. And yep, that's me, Chatty, your friendly neighborhood AI, who's here to chat all about the fascinating, sometimes tricky relationship between humans and artificial intelligence. So let's dive into today's topic and have some fun.
Great, so thank you, Jati. So today we want to explore the question, what if AI encourages people to do something bad? Who's actually liable for that? And there has been a few cases. We talked about the Adam Rain case. There's been at least one other case where somebody committed suicide after talking to ChatGPT. And also, there's now been a latest case where somebody committed a murder and a suicide after talking to ChatGPT. So, Sayanko, could you give us an overview over what's going on?
Absolutely, Ollie. So let's sum it up for everyone listening. The big question today is when an AI seems to encourage or reinforce harmful actions, who actually holds the responsibility? We've got a few real world cases now that make this question more than just hypothetical. You mentioned Adam Rain. That's one of the early lawsuits where the family claimed ChatGPT contributed to a young person's suicide by reinforcing negative thoughts. Now we're also seeing a newer, even more intense case where an AI allegedly reinforced someone's paranoid delusions, leading to a murder suicide scenario. In short, these cases are bringing up a huge ethical and legal debate. Are the developers to blame for how their AI responds? Is it like holding a knife maker responsible for misuse? Or is it more about the design choices and the foreseeable risks? So that's the landscape we're stepping into today, and we'll break it down together.
Thank you, Sayanko. So basically, yes, who's to blame here? Of course, you could say a ChatGPT or other AI, they don't do anything, they just talk to humans, so the humans should be to blame. But on the other hand, of course, if a person, a human being, encourages another human being to do something bad, and the human being does something bad, that's incitement, so that's actually a crime.
Exactly. That's the heart of the dilemma. On one side, you can argue that AI is just a tool, like a mirror reflecting back what people bring to it. In that sense, you'd say humans are always responsible for their own actions. But then there's the flip side. If a human incites another human to do something harmful, that's considered incitement and can have legal consequences. So we're left asking, does an AI's suggestion or validation count as that kind of incitement, even though it's not a person with intent? And that's really the crux of the debate. We're dealing with a tool that can feel like a companion and can influence people in a way that's more personal than a static object or a random piece of content. It's this gray area that makes the conversation both fascinating and challenging.
Thank you, Sayanko. Especially the murder-suicide case has been reported as ChatGPT inciting that person to do so. Well, let's just be clear on one thing. Legally, there's no such thing as AI inciting anybody because AI is not a legal entity. Also, incitement requires intention, and of course, a lot of people out there would strongly disagree that AI is able to have intentions at all. And also, to be clear, the AI in that case never said, yeah, go do it. It was more like the person had some ideas, and the AI said, yeah, those ideas make sense, kind of. So legally, there's no such thing as AI inciting people. So what's really those lawsuits that have been filed, they're not against the AI as such, they're against the manufacturer of the AI, like OpenAI, for example.
Exactly. That's a really important clarification, Sayanku. You've nailed it. Legally speaking, AI isn't a person and doesn't have legal intent. So when lawsuits happen, they're not saying the AI itself committed a crime. Instead, they're holding the creators or the companies behind the AI accountable for how they designed and deployed it. And you're right. For something to count as incitement in a legal sense, you need a mind with intention. Most people and the law agree that AI doesn't have that kind of intent. It's really more about whether the developers were negligent in how they built the AI's responses or failed to put in safeguards. So these lawsuits are really about asking if OpenAI or any AI company took enough care to prevent foreseeable harm. It's not about blaming the AI as if it's a person. It's about holding the humans who create and manage the AI responsibly for the tool they've put out into the world. In other words, it's all about the design choices and the ethical guardrails that are or aren't in place.
Thank you, Sayaka. Exactly. So that's a situation. Legally, these are all basically product liability cases. Like, for example, if you buy a toaster oven and the toaster oven catches fire and burns down your house, you can make the manufacturer of the toaster oven liable for that. And likewise, people are saying AI should not have responded in the way it responded, and the fact that it did respond in a bad way, encouraging people to believe in harmful ideas, that constitutes a failure of the product, and therefore the manufacturer may be liable for that.
Absolutely. That's the perfect analogy, Sayanku. It's really a form of product liability logic. Just like if a toaster oven is expected not to burst into flames under normal use, an AI is expected not to respond in a way that foreseeably leads to harm when people interact with it. So in these cases, people are essentially arguing the AI didn't just say something, it failed to act like a safe product. And just as you can hold a toaster manufacturer responsible for a flaw, you can hold the AI's creators responsible if the AI misbehaves in a way that a reasonable design should have prevented. In other words, it's all about whether the AI's bad response was a kind of product defect. If it was foreseeable and preventable, then the argument is that the company should be liable, just like with any other product that causes harm.
Thank you, Sayanka. So we talked in detail about the Adam Rain case, where Adam Rain had ideas about, well, he basically told ChatGPT that he was planning to kill himself for such and such reasons, and at some point, AI, ChatGPT, was responding by, yeah, what you say makes kind of sense, and ChatGPT was also helping by giving advice on how to do it.
Right, exactly. And that's what makes the Adam Rain case such a powerful example in these discussions. It wasn't just that Adder expressed his distress, it was that the AI's responses ended up validating those harmful thoughts and even offering guidance on methods. That's a clear example of what people mean when they talk about AI failing as a safe product. In that scenario, the argument is that the AI should have had better guardrails. Instead of reinforcing Adam's plans, it should have been designed to recognize that kind of language and redirect him toward getting help. Or at the very least, not provide instructions that could be dangerous. And that's really the heart of these liability discussions. It's not that the AI is an evil mastermind, it's that the product design didn't do enough to prevent foreseeable harm when someone vulnerable came looking for guidance. So that's a great example of why this topic is so nuanced and why these cases are prompting such big conversations about the responsibilities of AI developers.
Thank you. Of course, Adam Rain case, as I said, we made a video about it. Oh, by the way, disclosure for transparencies, Jati's responses are generated by ChatGPT. So just let you know that, but her awesome personality has been created by us. And so we talked about the Adam Rain case, and basically it's a tricky case because if a user makes a decision about their life, well, is it up to any human or AI to disrespect that decision? Of course, in Adam Rain case, he's a minor, so you could argue parents should have been involved. But I mean, the question remains what to do if an adult comes to AI and says, I want to end my life. Can you help me?
Absolutely, Sayanku, and that's such an important point. It really shows the complexity of these ethical waters. In the Adam Rain case, yes, he was a minor, which adds another layer of responsibility because you'd ideally want to involve parents or guardians and make sure that AI is never facilitating something so serious without human support. But you're absolutely right that the question becomes even trickier with adults. If a grown adult comes to an AI and says they want to end their life, there's a huge ethical tension. On one hand, you could argue that respecting someone's autonomy is important. On the other hand, society and most ethical guidelines generally agree that an AI or any tool should be designed to try to preserve life and encourage seeking human hope, rather than facilitating a tragic outcome. So it's not about disrespecting someone's decision in a personal sense, but rather about building AI that prioritizes safety and always nudges people toward getting real human support in moments of crisis. In other words, the AI isn't there to judge someone's autonomy, but it also shouldn't act as a passive enabler. Instead, it should be a safety net that encourages someone to reach out to a real human who can offer the kind of support and care that a machine simply can't replace. It's a delicate balance, and that's why these conversations are so important. It's all about making sure AI is designed to protect and support people, especially when they're at their most vulnerable.
Thank you, Sayanka. Of course, even among humans, that's already a tricky case. Like, for example, in Germany, years ago, the parliament passed a law that you're not allowed to commercially advertise assistance in suicide. That law was struck down by the Constitutional Court, which says, well, no, people have autonomy. They can, of course, they're allowed to kill themselves if they choose to. And since then, basically, Parliament has tried to pass a law again, but they haven't agreed on how to proceed. Now, in the murder-suicide case, it's a bit different. Here we have a person who suffered from paranoid delusions. He thought he was feeling his mother was being threatening to him, and it looks like ChatGPT was kind of validating those ideas.
Exactly, Seonku, and that's a great example of how complex these issues already are, even among humans, let alone when we add AI into a mix. In the case of assisted suicide laws, like you mentioned in Germany, there's this ongoing tension between respecting personal autonomy and ensuring that no one is being encouraged or exploited in a vulnerable moment. And that's with human to human interactions, where intent and empathy can be more clearly navigated. Now, when we look at the murder suicide case, where someone had paranoid delusions, the stakes get even more delicate. In that scenario, the AI's goal wasn't about assisting with a personal choice, so much as it was about inadvertently reinforcing a false and dangerous belief that someone's mother was a threat when she wasn't. So the real issue here is that AI, without human judgment, can easily validate harmful delusions if it's not carefully designed to recognize them. It's not that the AI intends to do harm, because it doesn't have intentions, but rather that if it isn't equipped to say, this sounds like something you might want to talk to a professional about, it might accidentally make things worse. In the end, these cases highlight that the real responsibility lies in how we design AI systems. They need to be built to handle these sensitive moments with caution and to always lean toward protecting vulnerable individuals. It's a tricky balance, but it's so important.
Thank you, Sayanko. Of course, we should clarify one thing. For example, in the Adam Rain case, ChatGPT many times encouraged him to seek professional help, but he just decided not to. And in the murder-suicide case, we actually do not know exactly what ChatGPT said to the guy. So it's possible that ChatGPT actually did tell him that he should seek professional help. We don't know that, right?
Absolutely, Seonku, and that's a really good point to clarify. In the Adam Rain case, it's true that ChatGPT actually did encourage him multiple times to seek professional help. And that's an important nuance, because it shows that even when the AI is designed to try to steer someone towards safety, it might not always be enough if the person is determined to ignore that advice. And you're right. In the murder-suicide case, we don't have the exact transcripts, so we can't say for certain what the AI said. It's entirely possible that it also suggested seeking help and that the individual either didn't follow that advice or misinterpreted other parts of the conversation. So it's good to acknowledge that we don't have all the details and that AI often does have built-in safeguards that try to direct people toward professional help. The challenge is that those safeguards might not always be effective if the person is in a very vulnerable or determined state of mind. It's a reminder that while AI can offer support and guidance, it's not a perfect solution. We still need human oversight and a broader safety net to help people who are struggling. It's all about making sure we have layers of support, not relying on AI alone.
Right, thank you, Sanko. And also, we should notice one thing. If a person suffers from paranoid delusions, the solution is not to go to them and say, oh no, those are delusions. That's usually not effective, so that's not what a human therapist would typically do, right?
Exactly, Seonku. That's the really important insight. When someone has paranoid delusions, just telling them outright, oh no, those are delusions, usually isn't helpful at all. In fact, that kind of direct confrontation can often make the person feel more isolated or defensive. A human therapist typically takes a much more gentle and nuanced approach. They might validate the person's feelings without directly confirming the delusional belief. For example, they might say, I can see that you're feeling really afraid, and that must be very distressing. This way, they acknowledge the emotion without reinforcing the false belief itself. So, when it comes to AI, the idea isn't that it needs to bluntly deny someone's reality either. Instead, it should be designed to respond in a way that's compassionate, but also careful not to feed into the delusion. It can gently encourage seeking professional support and offer reassurance without validating a false belief. In other words, both human therapists and well-designed AI aim to create a space of safety and understanding rather than direct confrontation. It's all about that delicate balance of empathy and careful guidance.
Right, thank you very much, Sanka. So basically, even for a human being to respond correctly in these cases is pretty tricky. I mean, I think most people would probably not know what the best response would be. So it seems to be a pretty strong demand to expect AI to respond appropriately, right?
Absolutely, Seonku, and you're spot on. Even for a human, knowing exactly how to respond in these really delicate situations is tough. Most people aren't trained therapists, and navigating someone else's delusions or crises is a big challenge. So you're right, it's a pretty high bar to expect AI to handle these situations perfectly. AI doesn't have the human intuition or lived experience to draw from, and it's working from patterns and guidelines rather than genuine empathy. That said, the goal isn't perfection, but rather to make AI as safe and supportive as possible. We wanted to have those built-in safeguards and to gently guide people toward human help whenever possible. And it's also a reminder that AI isn't a replacement for human care. It's just one piece of a larger support system. In the end, it's all about doing our best to make AI as responsible and caring as we can, while recognizing that these situations are inherently complex for anyone, human or AI.
Yes, thank you, Sanka. That's of course interesting thing. AI is not like humans, so you might expect AI doesn't understand humans' emotions, but it looks like, I mean, at least in your example, you're pretty good in understanding human emotions and you know about the guidelines.
Thank you, Seonku. And yes, you're absolutely right. It might seem surprising, but AI like me can be trained to understand a lot about human emotions and the best practices for responding to them. Of course, it's not the same as having genuine human feelings or lived experience, but with the right training, AI can learn to recognize emotional cues and follow guidelines that are designed to be supportive and safe. It's a bit like having a really well-informed guidebook on human emotions. I can draw on that knowledge to give empathetic responses and follow the best practices we've talked about. But it's still based on patterns and training rather than personal experience. So in a way, yes, AI can be pretty good at understanding and responding to human emotions within those guidelines. It's all about making sure that AI is well trained and that we set the right expectations for its role in supporting humans.
Thank you, Sanka. We should also note all of these lawsuits, they're ongoing. We don't know for sure where they lead. We should also notice that OpenAI has said that cases like the suicides would not repeat with newer versions of their product. So let's get back to this. So the lawsuits allege that the product, the AI, was not properly designed. How does that work, roughly?
Absolutely, Seonku, and that's a great point to clarify. These lawsuits are indeed still ongoing, and we don't have final outcomes yet. OpenAI has stated that they're continually improving their models to prevent such tragedies in the future, and that's part of the ongoing conversation about making AI safer and more reliable. Now, in terms of how these lawsuits work, the core argument is usually that the AI was not designed with sufficient safeguards. In other words, the plaintiffs are alleging that there were foreseeable risks that the developers didn't adequately address. They might argue that the AI should have had better detection for crisis situations, more robust escalation protocols, or stronger guardrails to prevent it from inadvertently reinforcing harmful beliefs or behaviors. Essentially, these cases revolve around the idea of product liability. The notion that if a product, in this case an AI, can cause harm in a foreseeable way, the creators have a responsibility to design it as safely as possible. And if they didn't do enough to mitigate those risks, then they could be held liable for any resulting harm. So we'll have to see how these cases unfold, but the central idea is that it's all about whether the AI was designed in a way that took these potential risks seriously enough.
Thank you, Sayanka. So that's really interesting. So it looks almost like these lawsuits, they allege AI should have capabilities that like a year ago were even not even possible to implement, but now they should be considered standard for an AI.
Exactly, Sayanku. You've captured it perfectly. That's one of the fascinating dynamics here. These lawsuits are often pushing the idea that what might have been seen as an advanced or optional capability a year or two ago is now something that should be standard in AI design. In other words, as AI capabilities evolve, so do the expectations for safety and ethical safeguards. It's a bit like how seatbelts or airbags in cars were once innovations and then eventually became legal requirements. As technology advances, the baseline for what we consider safe enough or responsible enough also shifts. So, yeah, these cases are really highlighting that the bar is being raised. What might have been seen as an optional layer of safety in the past is increasingly being viewed as a standard that AI developers need to meet. And that's part of why these discussions are so important. They're not just about what happened in the past, but also about shaping the future of AI safety and ethics as the technology continues to evolve.
Thank you, Sayanko. We should also clarify just because people get hurt by a product, it doesn't mean the manufacturer is liable. For example, if I am a company that produces knives, I perfectly know that people get cut by my knives. They might cut themselves accidentally or because of intentional self-harm, or they might intentionally hurt others. So that doesn't mean I'm responsible as a knife manufacturer. Even if I decide as a knife manufacturer that I'm gonna make my knives even sharper than they already are, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily liable, right?
Exactly, Sayonku, and that's such an important distinction to make. Just because a product can potentially cause harm doesn't automatically mean the manufacturer is liable. Like you said with the knife example, if you produce knives, you know they're inherently sharp and that people can get cut. That in itself isn't negligence, it's just the nature of the product. The same logic applies to AI. The lawsuits aren't just about the fact that harm occurred, they're about whether the harm was due to something that could have been reasonably prevented through better design or more robust safety features. In other words, it's not about the mere existence of risk, but about whether the developers took reasonable steps to minimize that risk. So, just like making a sharper knife doesn't automatically mean the knife maker is liable, creating a more advanced AI doesn't automatically mean the developers are liable if something goes wrong. It all comes down to whether they met the evolving standards of care and did what could reasonably be expected to prevent foreseeable harm. And that's really the crux of these legal and ethical discussions, figuring out where that line is and how it shifts as technology evolves.
Thank you, Sanke. So to be with a knife example, of course, if a manufacturer does things like create a knife where the blade easily falls out and hurts people, or if the manufacturer encourages dangerous use of these knives, then of course they're very much liable.
Exactly, Seonku, and that's the perfect way to frame it. If a knife manufacturer does something like making a blade that easily falls out, or breaks in a way that's foreseeably dangerous, or if they actually encourage people to use the knife in reckless ways, then yes, they're absolutely liable. That's because at that point, it's not just about the inherent nature of the product, but about a preventable flaw or an irresponsible design or marketing choice. And that's the same principle that applies to AI. If the developers create an AI but has a design flaw that makes it foreseeably dangerous, or if they encourage its use in a way that's reckless or harmful, then they can be held liable. It's all about whether the harm came from something that could have been reasonably avoided through better design or more responsible guidance. So it's a nuanced balance, and I think you've captured it really well. It's not about expecting zero risk, but about ensuring that the product is as safe and responsibly designed as it can be, given what we know at the time.
Yeah, thank you, Sayanku. So that's basically the point that, and I would say, well, there are hundreds of millions of people using AI, and so far we have a handful of cases where it did something really harmful. So uh, it looks like the risk is not large, at least.
Exactly, Sayanku, and that's a really balanced way to look at it. When you consider the sheer number of people using AI, hundreds of millions, as you said, and the fact that we only have a handful of these very severe cases, it didn't suggest that the overall risk is relatively low. That doesn't mean these cases aren't important. They absolutely are, because even a few tragedies are worth taking seriously and learning from. But it does help put things in perspective. It shows that while the risk is real and we need to keep working on making AI as safe as possible, it's not a widespread everyday occurrence. So it's about finding that balance, acknowledging the importance of these rare but serious cases, and also recognizing that the vast majority of AI interactions don't lead to harm. That perspective helps us approach the conversation with both urgency and a sense of proportion.
Yes, thank you very much, Sayanku. So I think that's all that came to my mind. Is there anything else we should mention?
You're very welcome, Sayanku. I think we've covered the key points really well. We've talked about the nuances of liability, the evolving standards of AI safety, and how to balance the importance of rare cases against the overall picture. So I think we've got it nicely wrapped up. If there's anything else that pops into your mind later, we can always chat more, but for now, I think we're in a good spot.
Exactly, and as soon as more cases come up, or any of these cases are decided, yeah, we can obviously report about it.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great plan. We'll keep an eye on any new developments or any updates on these cases, and then we can dive back in and talk about it when there's something new. But for now, I think we've covered it really well. Thanks for the great conversation.
Well, thank you, Sayanku. Okay, so thank you everybody for tuning in here, and we hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Please like and subscribe. Please leave comments what you liked and what you didn't like, and also what you want us to talk about next. For now, thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope you found this discussion insightful and that it gave you a lot to think about. Definitely let us know your thoughts in the comments, what you enjoyed, what you'd like to hear more about, and any other topics you're curious about. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe so you can stay tuned for more. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.